We are back, and we are joined now by Schuyler Mitchell, a former editor at The Intercept, writer based in Brooklyn, whose piece in the Baffler is entitled Pinkwashing the Timeline. Schuyler, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you wrote this piece because this is a typical thing, an argument that you hear from supporters of Israel that Israel's so LGBTQ friendly, and the savages on the other side, I mean, they're Muslim, so just think about it for a second. And you articulate how that kind of propaganda effort plays out. But let's just start with the term pinkwashing. What is it, and how do Zionists supporting Israel engage in it?
Yeah, so pinkwashing is the deliberate strategy of using a cloak of liberal values, LGBTQ tolerance, to shroud Israeli human rights abuses committed against Palestinians. So, in the wake of October 7th, what this has looked like, pinkwashing is not new, but it has been playing out on social media as, expressions like queers for Palestine or, expressions of LGBTQ support for the Palestinian people have been derided as, naive or contradictory. And, it's essentially, kind of throwing queer people under the bus in the name of, propping up Israel as this bastion of tolerance in the Middle East, as if, Israel's acceptance of LGBTQ people is, somehow legitimizes its current military campaign.
Right. And it's been used even before this military campaign, as you say, to talk about how Israel is somehow this liberal bastion, when I would argue that there's human rights not being respected kind of undercuts maybe that claim. Now you cite this sketch in your piece we're going to play a second of it so people get a sense. This is from November, even though it is about Columbia students. I guess this was before of course it was before the encampment, but I forget what action Columbia students took that prompted this. What were they doing in November? I'm forgetting.
There were arrests in November. Columbia students, SGP and
Right.
and JVP faced sanctions. There were all these protests. I mean, this has been going on for months now. So, and yeah, I wrote this
They
piece before.
suspended SJP and Jewish Voice for Peace, I believe, or they were targeted, something to that effect. I guess the specifics aren't that important. But this Israeli TV channel, which is, I guess, their kind of SNL equivalent, and Brett Gelman participated in this as well, but not in this sketch. Did this I guess satirical sketch about college students in this country, and a lot of what you're describing is on display here. We're gonna play it in just a second.
Hi everyone, we are live on YouTube with Columbia Anti-Semitic News, where everyone is welcome. LGBTQH.
H?
Hamas.
Yeah, I totally sim Hamas.
Yeah.
It's so trending right now.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Do you know why it's true? Because it rhymes.
Oh.
Just look at all this toxic Zionist propaganda. Kidnapped in Gaza. Does this look like Gaza to you?
Yeah.
All right, I think we got the gist. I think we got the gist. They do
So
at one
grating.
point talk. It's horrible. They do at one point talk about queer people, I guess. But that's just kind of a good example of, I think, the their attempts to satirize or say that in some way kids standing up for Palestine are contradicting themselves in some way, but really it's just like an extension of their portrayal of themselves as victims all the time and staving off the savages on the other side of the wall. If you could just explain that a bit more.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I saw that video, which went viral back in November, one of the things, that stood out to me was, yeah, so I think they said in that clip, we support LGBTQH with the
Right,
H being
Hamas.
for Hamas. And then, one of the students later on says, I majored in queer post-colonial astrology, and they wave a rainbow pride flag that has the Palestinian flag in its center, sort of a composite flag. And then they, do a video call with a member of Hamas, and they're like, "We love you so much." And the Hamas militant is like, "If you come to Gaza, I'll throw you from the roof." Right. So it's very emblematic of the prevailing rhetoric, particularly, in the past few months. And what was interesting to me was that it used, like you said, Eretz Nehederet is considered like a liberal program in Israel. They critique Netanyahu's administration in their Hebrew language sketches, but in their English language sketches, which it's worth noting, they're doing them in English to reach a Western audience, and they're posting on YouTube. And it's very, it's a concerted effort to reach the West because, they've said, the writers of the show have said that this is an existential battle for the soul of the nation, and that they just need to do their part. And so it's interesting that what doing that part looks like is focusing on American college students, and then also kind of invoking these tropes that you usually see on like Fox News or right-wing programs, which is, the expression like, of course you have blue hair and pronouns. This idea that, they literally have blue hair in this sketch. The idea that leftists like look funny and are obsessed with pronouns and are obsessed with queer theory. These are tropes we see all the time. And to see that then used and conflated with loving Hamas was also really interesting, and something that I touch on in the piece of, this victimization, where not only are Israel's supporters and Israel, being victimized by Hamas, but also, these queer students. And this isn't the only sketch. There's at least one other one that does a similar thing. So that was something I was just really interested in and wrote about in the piece.
Well, it's amazing to see that the program considers itself, I guess, liberal, right? Because we've spoken about this inherent contradiction of you can't be liberal in a settler colonial society, and but its attempts to appeal to the West kind of hinge on these themes of liberal democracy. And again, it can't be a democracy when you rule over millions of people and don't give them a voice. But like that is the portrayal of Israel that they want the West to absorb. And it's just fascinating because like these liberal college students, they're also a part of the West. Like there are Democrats that you're supposedly trying to appeal to with this Hasbara, but it's not. It's working. It's getting diminishing returns. It's just that this was, even before October 7th, something that was at the forefront of how Israel tried to portray itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting is there's also this contradiction where there's a lot of contempt for these queer students,
Right.
And other posts on social media, making fun of expressions like queers for Palestine by saying it's like saying we're chickens and we love KFC, or there's just a lot of hatred, I think, that's being misdirected at, queer people or, queers for Palestine. And that is itself, the contradiction, right? If you're saying that we're liberal and we're tolerant, but then, why this focus on, people thousands of miles away that, are not actually, there was actually a tweet that I saw in the last 24 hours that was like, it's funny how, the blue-haired social justice lawyer has gone from being a Fox News trope to being literally Hamas. Like, and we've seen that rhetoric crop up again in the latest, police raids on college campuses. Like this idea that these students are not just speaking out in support of, oppressed people, but that they're literally agents of
Terrorists.
Hamas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you also see this is parallel propaganda, the pinkwashing, to when women like myself, or maybe you, I don't want to speak for you, Schyler, but when people say like, well, you just go to Gaza and you'll get raped there. You would love, you would get raped there. And it's just like, oh, would I? Would I really? Because in the end, it just is like all of the oldest racist tropes in the book about how people of this skin color are going to go after your women. They don't respect your femininity. That they don't respect queer and gay people there. When you actually talk to Palestinians, it's societies have their own contradictions and bigotries, right? But there's nothing inherently anti-women or anti-LGBTQ in Gaza. It's just really a part of a carefully constructed project against, honestly, Muslims, propaganda project.
And I think, the point that something I write in my piece is that there's no freedom for the dead. So, if you support women's rights, if you support LGBTQ rights, you're not bringing liberation to people by killing them. That's just like a very basic, material contradiction. And, there was this real emblem of that in a social media post by an Israeli soldier, where he's standing in the rubble of a Gaza city holding a pride flag, and the pride flag says, in the name of love. And it's like, you can't liberate people these people are being bombed, they're being killed, there's a genocide happening. So yeah, so even, whatever truths, exist about, homophobia or misogyny, like bombing them isn't going to change that either. So
right.
on a whole other level, in addition to it being an Islamophobic, trope. So.
And I mean, this is also a part of, I think you'll see this consistently, and it's a good alarm bell if you're hearing a right-wing argument where it's a portrayal of victimhood that is completely disconnected from material realities. I mean, there's no reality in which Israel is the victim here, or is the David and the Goliath story. They are the top recipient of military aid from the most powerful country in the world. They have a nuke. They have the most advanced technology available. But that is something that you will often hear from right-wingers trying to justify atrocities, is that they're the ones who are actually victimized.
Right. Yeah. And, my piece, it talks about, I cite this journal article by this political scientist named Heike Schoten, who wrote a piece that was published in 2022 in Transgender Studies Quarterly that talks about extinction phobia. So this idea that, this is a hallmark of ethno-nationalist regimes where the minority population is being cast as the real threat, that the minority population has the power to oppress, the people that are actually in power, and that they also have this eliminationist intent. Like, not only do you cast your political opponent as savage or threatening and evil, but also that they are literally trying to erase you, because that is something, once you create that construction, that like solidifies the national identity
and justifies anything.
Opposition to that.
And justifies anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so in the United States, like with white nationalism, we've also seen that, with far right people talking about, the migrants coming over the border, that they're threatening the American way of life. And that also working in tandem with this, the wave of transphobia, this fear mongering about trans people are literally trying to sterilize our children and like wipe out, a portion of the population. All these things are very insidious.
Well, the piece is called Pinkwashing the Timeline. Schuyler Mitchell, we will put a link to it in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. It's on the Baffler. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.